Hello. All right, you guys. We got to talk about sinners.
We've been gone a long time. We back now.
You twins?
Nah, we cousins.
There are legends of people with the gift of making music so true. It can conjure spirits from the past and the future. This gift can bring fame and fortune.
Will somebody take me in your eyes?
But it also can pierce the veil between life and death.
The Blues Origin Institute is a nonprofit organization founded by Chris Thomas King. I was dragged to this movie over the weekend. Saturday night before Easter, my daughter was like, we got to go see this movie. She had already seen it. She was saying, we got to see this movie. You got to come and see the movie. And so she dragged me and my wife out, the late show, 10:30, IMAX. And I didn't know what I was getting myself in for. I was trying to make every excuse in the book because I wasn't really feeling a vampire movie, but it wasn't a horror movie. But anyway, just to cut to the chase, this film is phenomenal. And I'm not a person that just gets on here and make videos. But I'm making a video about this particular movie because I was so moved by it. I don't do movie reviews, but this thing was an amazing work of art, and it's something that is it just touched my very being, and I was so excited. Leaving the theater, I think I just floated out of the theater. As a matter of fact, it was so good. So, congratulations to the entire cast, everybody who put this film together, because putting something like this together, I know it's not easy. Blues is the theme of this film, and that's why I'm here to talk about it. Because when you start talking about the blues and you want to depict it on film, well, I've been there, I've done that, I've had some frustrations, had some successes. I'm Chris Thomas King, the actor who played Tommy Johnson, who sold his soul to the devil at the crossroads, and Old Brother Warthog. This is the 25th anniversary of Old Brother Warthog. It's been 25 years since the movie came out, and the soundtrack, was a huge success. And I was proud to have played that role and did the score and everything, and we had tremendous success. And, we have some things coming up this year celebrating the 25th anniversary of it. A new album is being put together by T-Bone Burnett to celebrate this. And at my concerts, I'm playing New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival this weekend. Be featuring songs from there. But I'm not here to talk about Old Brother. I'm just here to kind of give you a sense of who I am and what I've been doing, the credibility that I have to talk about the blues, talk about the beautiful cinema photography, set design, the way they colored, black people's skin, and when you're filming at night and you got dark-skinned people, you don't want to overlight the set. You want to keep it dark and keep them in the shadows and things, but everybody's skin was just glowing. It was just very beautifully put together. But I'm here to talk about the blues aspect of the film, because a lot of people have been asking me about it, coming to me, some of the ideas that were in my book, The Blues, the Authentic Narrative of My Music and Culture. This book right here. This book, The Blues, the Authentic Narrative of My Music and Culture, this book is all over the movie. And the book is all over the movie. Now, I wrote this book a few years back. It came out a few years back, and it's been changing the way we think about the blues, changing the definition of the music, changing and reconnecting this music to where it really came from. And a lot of people probably saw the highlights and say, oh, this blues, and oh, they're going to be picking cotton, and this is something about slavery. And this movie tells you that the blues didn't come from slavery. They see some chain gang workers and drive right on by. You know, they don't stop and start singing some work songs because the blues don't have anything to do with work songs. And the blues did not come from Africa. I went to Africa. People in Africa told me that didn't come from them. And even though the movie is set in the Mississippi Delta in 1932, the blues did not come from the Mississippi Delta. The blues came from New Orleans. And New Orleans is the birthplace of the blues. It happened in the 1890s. And that's what the authentic narrative of the blues is, of my music and culture. And that's what guided this film and gives it a whole different perspective than what you normally get from this type of film and this type of genre where they're dealing with music and dealing with the blues. The blues is a Creole meaning. What do I mean by Creole? What I mean by Creole meaning is that the elements came from Africa. The instruments came from Africa. The progenitors are African. But they ended up here in the New World with people who were born here in the New World, quote unquote New World, and these people took those elements, took what they could the spirit, the feeling, the melodies, the rhythms, the dance, the circle dance. They took all of these things and they created a new music in a new place, and that's what makes it Creole. Creole means that it was born basically in the Spanish colony is really what it means, but Louisiana was Spanish. And then the guitar the guitar, man. The things that they did with this guitar, so far I haven't spoiled anything about the scenes of the movie. So if you haven't seen this movie yet, get to the theater and see it, because I might just give some spoilers here that you don't want to hear. But for those people that have seen the movie, we're going to talk about it, and I'm going to try to keep this focus on the blues aspect because a lot of people don't have the language to talk. They want to talk about what they felt and what they saw. And what they saw in this beautiful scene where time just seems to disappear, and the past and the present and the future is all mingling and dancing and interacting together. The spirits, the memories, it's hard to put it into words. So I'm trying to give some language that I came up with in my book that describes what the blues really is. Now, the first thing you need to know about the blues is that the word blues it means vice, and it comes from a French word, and I'm going to butcher. I don't speak French, but sacre bleu. It comes from the word sacre bleu. Holy shit, that's what the blues mean. And they created the Anglo-Saxon Protestants when they came into Louisiana, and you had all of this music going on. You had all of this cultural things happening here in Louisiana that wasn't really happening, say, in the Carolinas, in the Virginias, and other places in the British colonies. But here in Louisiana, in the colony, the Spanish and French colony here, culture was very different. And people could buy their freedom, manumission, and things like this. So you had a lot of free Black people in Louisiana, and music was always a high priority. The theater was always a high priority here in Louisiana. And it was infused with theater lovers and opera lovers, culture lovers out of Haiti that came into Louisiana and brought other rhythms, brought their passions, brought red beans, brought the Tresillo rhythms, the triplet feel, or the Spanish tinge, as Jelly Roll Martin would call it. And so all this kind of merged in this cosmopolitan place here in Louisiana, in New Orleans. And the blues is a cosmopolitan invention. It was invented in New Orleans in the 1890s. Like I said, the ingredients came from Africa. But the blues is a new philosophy for a new place, for a new time, and for a new people. When I say Creole, means that it's rejecting what was imposed on the people in Louisiana by the Anglo-Saxon Protestants, who weren't into, Catholicism. Our Mardi Gras and things were bawdy events. People get drunk, people dance, people get rowdy on our religious holidays. So the blues is not a sad music. And in this movie, they don't depict the blues as anything but a Saturday night good time, Laissez le bon temps rouler, let the good times roll music. And that's one of the things that I love about it, because that's true to the spirit of the blues. So let me just pause a little bit. And let me say that the young man that played, I think his name is Miles, who played the young blues musician, the young Delta blues musician whose father was a preacher. I mean, he did a phenomenal job in this film. And obviously he has a great voice and a great career ahead of him. Now, was he playing that dobro guitar? I'm not so sure that in some scenes, every time you saw him with the guitar, that he was playing it. Matter of fact, there was a scene where he was driving along and playing some slide guitar. He was playing some slide guitar. The guitar looks something like this, right? It looks something like my old dobro. I haven't picked up this dobro and I don't know when. I got a different one that I use sometime. But he was, man. Now, he was playing this dobro, and he was in a truck or something, in a car. I only saw the movie once. I'm going to see it again. But he was playing the dobro and looked like somebody's hand was up there fingering that guitar. And that's an old trick from a movie I think called Deliverance, where the banjo picker was playing some badass banjo, but they had some guy's hand up there, through the sleeve and everything, fingering it. And then he was just strumming with his right hand. And then that made the scene work, and it convinced you of the veracity or that he's a real musician that can really play this stuff. But trust me, you can't learn to play the dobro and play the blues in 2 months or a couple of months on a movie set. But there's things that people can do in movies to make it look like you're really doing that. For example, when I did the movie Ray, the Ray Charles score, I recorded my part. I played Lowell Folsom in the movie Ray, the band leader that took Ray Charles on the road and everything, and was cheaply paying him, cheating the blind man out of, paying him a 1 and calling it a 20, that type of thing. Well, but that's not how I do in real life, but I played Lowell Folsom.
Every day, every day I the blues. Every day, every day.
Damn, baby, that's all right. Boy, I've been shooting craps since I was 12 years old. Don't never shoot craps on a white woman grave. That's bad luck.
You know bad luck and trouble, people. Well, you know I had my share.
That's for being late to the bus.
Well, but you a low down piece.
You better move on. Ah, Mr. $1 bill.
5, 10, 15, 20.
Now, you like to start counting that again?
All right, damn you.
8, 4, 5. Listen, man, I ain't no damn seeing eye dog.
You know, ain't nobody worried about me. I don't see nobody crying.
And I worked with Ray Charles in the studio. I was one of the only people in the film that really did his own singing and playing and guitar playing with Ray Charles. And I'm singing Every Day I Had a Blues and some other tunes with Ray Charles bagging me up on the piano. And this was one of the last things that he did before he passed away, because Ray Charles passed away before the movie came out. And I'm saying that to say that Jamie Foxx was not in the studio the days that I was in the studio in LA working with Ray Charles. And so a lot of what you saw in the movie Ray, that was Ray Charles playing the piano. And Jamie, he can play the piano and Jamie can sing, and he's extremely talented. But to be able to sing and play the blues and really be able to play it like Ray Charles, that's a whole different story. And luckily, Ray Charles was there to perform his own music and do his own singing. And I was sitting right next to him for most of it. Now in the movie, in Ray, I'm singing my own stuff. In the movie Old Brother Warthal, I'm at the campfire doing Hard Time Killing Floor Blues, you know, about the killing floor. And that's a live recording, you know, like a field recording. T-Bone Burnett and the guys had the microphones, you know, and you can hear the crickets and everything, and it's 4 a.m, we out there on the Ponderosa Ranch in L.A., you know, and I'm recording, you know, Hard Time Killing Floor Blues. Nervous as hell, and I'm in character and everything, but it worked. It was like lightning in a bottle. It's really what it helped bring the music of Old Brother and make it really real. The soundtrack and the acting, everything just became one seamless thing. And I was able to convince the audience that this is a real guy playing. That was me doing that. You folks going past Tishomingo?
Sure, hop in.
How you doing, son? Name's Everett. These two soggy sons of bitches are Pete and Delmer. Keep your fingers away from Pete's mouth. He ain't had nothing to eat for 13 years except prison food, gopher, and a little greasy horse.
Thanks for the lift, sir. My name's Tommy Johnson.
How you doing, Tommy? Say, I haven't seen a house out here for miles. What are you doing out in the middle of nowhere?
Well, I had to be at that there crossroads last midnight. Sell my soul to the devil.
Well, ain't it a small world, spiritually speaking? Pete and Delmer just been baptizing.
This guy, Miles, there's a scene where he's performing, and the juke joint opens up and the sky opens up and time kind of gets suspended. And then you see ancient dancers, ring dancers and things from Africa or from Congo Square in New Orleans, which is really what this scene is about. This scene is a Congo Square scene, which I write about in my book. And Congo Square, you know, from the early, from about 1720 or so, people came straight from Africa. They didn't stop in the Caribbean. They came straight from Africa to Louisiana with all their Africanness with them. And they brought their musical instruments with them. They brought the guitar with them. Not the banjo, the guitar. They brought the guitar with them. And they played these instruments in a place in New Orleans called Congo. We call it Congo Square. Today, we call it Louis Armstrong Park. but it's Congo Square. And I'm not saying that they were playing the blues in the 1700s, but they were continuing their spiritual and musical traditions that they brought with them from Africa. And into the 1800s, when Louisiana was still owned by the Spanish, and you had people out there playing guitars in Congo Square, it was all good because people in Spain were used to the guitar being part of their culture. And in my book, there's a gentleman who went by the name Blackbird around the 700 AD, 800 AD, and he's known as the person who brought the guitar and introduced the guitar into Europe. And because before that, the guitar was not a part of Europe musical expression. He is the one who's known to have brought it into Europe, opened a music school, taught people how to do suites of music and things like this, and brought that music there. And then you find a guitar in Congo Square, not a banjo, a guitar in Congo Square that's a Moorish guitar. And there's a gentleman from England in around 1818, his name Latrobe, an architect who knows how to draw. He drew the instrument in like 2D dimension, like from the side and from the front. And it had a hole, a circular hole in the middle of it, which means it's a guitar and not a banjo. A banjo is flat like a drum or a tambourine. It's got a skin over it, a round skin over it, and you play it. And that comes from an instrument in West Africa. Most people believe it came from the instrument, the accounting. But it's important to understand that the accounting might have been, and the banjo might have been in the Carolinas. The banjo might have been over there. But the banjo, even though people did play the banjo in Louisiana, don't get me wrong, but the guitar, which has all of this power and expressiveness, more so than the banjo, was in New Orleans from the 1700s throughout the 1800s, the 1900s, and I'm still playing the guitar in New Orleans today, keeping that spirit going. And why is that important? Because, I mean, there's a scene in the movie where you have the Irish musicians, and he's got his banjo, they got the fiddle and the violin and everything, and they want to come in and jam. They want to come and join the party. And it's, it was very funny to me because they wouldn't allow the banjo into the Juke joint. They had the guitar. And in any other Hollywood movie, they definitely would have got in the club and got on stage and everybody would have been jamming together. But this movie, some people might think that the movie was about race, but I thought the movie was about culture. It was about culture. And you had the blues culture expressed in the film. But then the Irish, who ended up being the early vampires in the film, they had their culture and their way of expressing music, which is very different from the African folk expression. I give lectures on this book, so I go around and I've, been going to every little place that'll have me to talk about this, to talk about my book and to give the true meaning of the blues. So let me just refocus real quick. So I'm here giving spoilers for the movie Sinner. So if you've seen the movie, you want to go see the movie and then come back to this. And like I said, I'm not a movie reviewer, but blues is something I know a little bit of something about. And there's some scenes in the movie, some things that happen in the movie that comes directly out of my book. As a matter of fact, when Sammie, when they give Miles, the twins, Michael B. Jordan, who's phenomenal in the film, he might get a Best Oscar and Best Supporting Actor Oscar nomination, for this thing. He played two roles, he played twins. And what's important about the narrative of the blues is that the blues, like I said, it didn't begin in the Mississippi Delta, didn't begin with slavery, don't have anything to do with work songs. It's Saturday night good time music. A lot of sensuality, in the blues. And these are the things that America tried to suppress. And these are the things why this is, but there's power in the spirituality of the blues, and there's power in this music and in those stringed instruments, meaning that how they penetrate and make you feel and create certain kinds of vibes. And then you have the hoodoo and voodoo practices that are intertwined with the blues. And all of this comes together, and back in the day, early 1900s, late 1800s, in Louisiana, this didn't spook anyone, but it did spook WASP people, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant people were always spooked by this combination. And a lot of anglicized black folks are also spooked by hoodoo and voodoo and the blues. I mean, the real blues, not the blues that we have been kind of told it has something to do with being downtrodden and down in the dumps. So the definition of the blues is Saturday night music, but the anglicized definition of the blues is that the blues is down in the dumps, sad, depressed, melancholy, pain and mourning and all this kind of stuff. And that is not what the blues is. Miles Davis said, look, I think Miles Davis said, look, his teacher at Juilliard was telling him something about that he has to suffer to play the blues. And Miles Davis said, I can play the blues, and I have never suffered, and I don't intend to suffer. And so the blues is not about suffering. It's about connecting with the cosmos. I can get deeper into it, and I do get deeper into it in the book. But the way I write is different from the way I speak. It just goes like that. But just remember, the definition I'm talking is a Creole definition. It's Saturday night good time music, and that's what this juke joint was represented. It represented kind of personal freedom for everybody involved. One of the things that happened is with Miles, his cousins, the twins, the gangsters who came down to the Delta and brought the juke joint concept down in this film. And wanted to open the juke joint, they had the moonshine, and they had stolen, and some money they had robbed, double crossed some Italian gangsters like Al Capone and people in Chicago, in the speakeasy world up there. And so they were coming to the Delta to make their mark. And they had a guitar. It looked something like this here. And they gave the guitar to Sammie, young Sammie. And they told Sammie this guitar came from Charlie Patton. Now, Charlie Patton is a blues singer who used to do gospel. Like all the Delta players, they were gospel players, most of them, the early ones, before they were introduced to the blues. Because like I said, the blues came from New Orleans, it went to Chicago, and then made its way down to the Delta on phonograph records. So it arrived in the Delta in the late 1920s on record. And the Delta musicians heard these records at the plantation stores. And then they decided they wanted to stop playing gospel music in the church and stuff and start playing this music, the blues. Not only did they want to start playing this type of music, they wanted to put down that plow and make their way up to Chicago, where people like Lonnie Johnson, New Orleans guitar, basically a guitar god who really introduced the blues, the guitar as a solo instrument, as a blues expressive instrument, as a solo instrument. He's the one that everybody, all guitar players, from Eric Clapton to me and anybody else, is trying to emulate. Lonnie Johnson, not Robert Johnson, not Tommy Johnson, Lonnie Johnson. Lonnie Johnson is the beginning of blues guitar, expressive blues guitar out of New Orleans. So they gave this guitar to young Miles, to Sammie, and told him it was Charlie Patton's guitar. And so he cherished this thing. He was like, man, this This is my first real blues guitar from a real blues, legend, somebody who really could mesmerize the crowd. And he just thought the world of this thing. And he held on to this guitar, man, for dear life. Nobody was going to take that guitar out of his hand. And he cherished this thing. And then there's other aspects of the movie that comes directly from a part of my book. And if you will indulge me, I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs. And if you've seen the movie, you're going to recognize these. You're going to recognize these paragraphs. So this is the book, The Blues, the authentic narrative of my music and culture. And on page 207, I'm going to read page 207. This is to set up this scene. My dad, Rockin' Tabby Thomas, and look, I grew up in a juke joint. That was the family business. We had a juke joint called Tabby's Blues Box and Heritage Hall for over 25 years. And as a young teenager, that's where I learned to play the blues in the family juke joint. And this book lays out how a juke joint smells, how it tastes, the sweaty funk of the people dancing, the shuffling feet, the whole thing. If you want to know anything about a juke joint and what a juke joint is, nobody called them juke joints in 1932. They called them barrel houses and buckets of blood and whatever else. You saw the guy with the switchblade, he was going to cut somebody for dancing with his woman or whatever. So these were some rowdy places. But we had what people call a juke joint called Tabby's Blues Box and Heritage Hall. It's where I grew up. And that was the family. The juke joint was the family business. That's what we did. Buddy Guy, who was also in this film, used to play with my dad back in the day. Because Buddy Guy is from my hometown. He's from the Baton Rouge. I'm from Baton Rouge. I've toured a lot with Buddy Guy, performed a lot with him. His family and my family were pretty close. So anyway, in this scene, you're going to recognize this scene. My dad is leaving. I'm a kid. I'm like 9, 10, 11 years old. And my dad is going on the road with his band. And I'm pretty sad about it because I want to go with him. He just had an argument with my mother. And I'm thinking I'm not going to see my dad again. If he goes on tour, I'm not going to see him again. Plus, I want to play music, and he's my way into this world of music. And I'm thinking I'm never going to see my dad again. So it's hot. He's in a station wagon. His musicians in the station wagon. They got a wagon behind them. The Mighty House Rockers painted on the wagon, and the equipment back there and everything. And he's trying to hit the road. And so I'll come in halfway through the conversation. And I say, "Can I come?" I ask. "No," he answered. "Maybe when you get a little older." I felt sad. I was thinking, I may not see him again. Dad glanced over to the window of the house. His weary eyes watched my mom turn and walk away from the window. Dad fixed his attention back as if I was the most important thing in the world. Dad knelt and said, "Look, you have to be the man around the house while I'm gone, okay?" As he wiped the tear from my cheek, I composed myself. He tried to prepare me for his exit. The band members waiting in the station wagon grew impatient. "Come on, Tabby," they complained. "I want you to go to school. Help your mother around the house, all right? We got to get going, Tabby," his house rockers grumbled. "In a minute, man. Damn," Dad insisted, making me feel even more special. Then he went to the back of the wagon. Dad reached inside for a guitar case. He opened it, revealing a sunburst guitar. He handed me the instrument. I nervously held the hollow body archtop. "This guitar once belonged to Slim Hoppo. I want you to have it." I couldn't believe my eyes. Wow, I thought. A guitar once owned by Slim? I could hardly hear what he was saying because the silent guitar was playing so loud within my psyche. When Slim played it, he felt free as a bird, Dad said. Folks say they had to pry it out of his hands after he passed away. I marveled at the guitar. Folks say, if you can play the right notes, the heavens will open, grant you anything you wish, Dad whispered. Now you take it. Maybe you can find them special notes. It didn't matter if what he said was true. Dad knew myths and legends are what captured a young boy's imagination. Like the Excalibur sword of legend. With this guitar in hand, I believed I could slay the dragon, find them special notes. And it goes on. Now, that's page 207 in my book. Now, when I was watching the movie, instead of this guitar once belonged to Slim Harpo, they said this guitar once belonged to Charlie Patton. I want you to have it. And young Miles, young Sammie was, it just, it was like he had the crown jewel in his hand, the Excalibur sword. He could slay the dragon with this thing. And speaking of slaying the dragon, at the end of the movie, I'm spoiling now, at the end of the movie, he takes the guitar and slays the demon with the guitar. He takes the dobro and cuts the demon right in the head and slays the dragon right there on the screen, and I was screaming my head off with joy. It was an amazing, amazing scene. And then, like I said in the book, about Slim Harpo, I said in the book, and this is all just from one page, this is page 207. Then I said in the book, my dad said, quote, when Slim played it, he felt free as a bird. Dad said, folks say they had to pry it out of his hand after he passed away. Now, Buddy Guy comes on in a coda at the end of the film, one of the codas, and Buddy Guy tells the vampires that day he felt free as a bird. So having him come back, some people might say, well, why did they come back to that scene? Well, without coming back to that scene, there's a lot of things that doesn't connect. You needed that scene. Free as a bird, personal freedom, freedom of expression, finding himself, being in touch with, we're not going to get too mystical right here. But that line, when Slim played it, he felt free as a bird. And Buddy Guy asked elder Sammie, 90-some-year-old Sammie or 80-some-year-old Sammie said, I felt free as a bird. And it meant so much to kind of close out the arc of the story of the guitar player, Sammie. It was beautifully done. But these guys got it right. They didn't. They followed the authentic narrative of the blues, meaning that the blues arrived in the Delta. And another thing, when my dad gave me the guitar and he said, if you find those few special notes, maybe you're the one that can unlock with those few special notes, can unlock the heavens. That's in the film. They brought that to life with the scene where the juke joint opened up, and then all of a sudden you see somebody from a different time and a different time period dancing along with all the contemporary dancers at the juke joint from 1932. And then you see other people, and you see other cultures, and you see people. And it was done so beautifully And, you know, because people all around the world, from Madagascar to the islands, the Hawaiian Islands, to the Tejano people, the African people all over the globe had a culture of music, lighting candles on the beach someplace, playing music, and women with hardly any clothes on, but nothing was censored. This wasn't brothel culture. Kids and everybody participated in these traditions, and it was something people did for millennia. But now we're in this new world. We're in this new industrial world, and you got to make a way. And like I said, those ingredients, those instruments come from Africa. The guitar comes from Northern Africa. The oldest guitar that we know of in history comes from Egypt. It's about 4,500 years old. It still exists. There may be some older from Africa, but this is the oldest one that has survived. And the guitar player name was Harmus. And we know that it's a guitar because he had a plectrum, you know, his pick strung around his neck, or was it strung around the guitar, one or the other? But so this is this guitar thing is following the history of the guitar leads you back to Africa, from Africa to Moorish Spain, to Congo Square, to, you know, to Sammie, to Buddy Guy, to myself. Now, I just want, before I get out of here, I just want to touch on a little bit of hoodoo and voodoo. Because hoodoo and voodoo is another, the true meaning of the blues has been suppressed and hidden away and obfuscated in books. My book is the first book to really lay out the real origin story of the blues. There is no other book that's done that. Matter of fact, in my research, I couldn't even find another annotated history book on the blues ever written by another black person. It doesn't exist. Now, you might tell me, you know, there might be some biographies as told to stories and things like that, but nobody's written a real history and done the kind of research that I did and the sojourns that I did to bring this thing together. And I'm here to just give, out of 10 if I had to give this movie 5 stars, I would give it 7. If I had to give it 10, I would give it 12. It's so good, and it made me feel so wonderful to see a Hollywood film that really follows the authentic narrative of my music and culture. And this movie is not about race as much as it is about culture. Yeah, there's the Klan. And yeah, there's, this and that going on. But these are different cultures that are really distinct. And then they're merging and finding, they're merging in this film. Now, this is not a historical film. It's fiction. I mean, there's vampires and stuff. It's fiction. But let me just say a couple other things about hoodoo and voodoo. Now, this is an album I did a few years back. Dirty South Hip Hop Blues, with my dobro there, with the city of New Orleans under me. And this is an album that I did just a few years back. It's a really good album that most people probably should have in their Hotel Voodoo. So we've been singing about voodoo, and blues for many years. My dad, his most popular song was called The Hoodoo Party.
Town boogie hey boogie chillin'. Well now boogie woogie chillin', boogie till the break of dawn. Well the king and the queen dressed in red, they had 24 diamonds sitting on their old Slim don't move me like he used to do. Boogie hey, boogie chillin'. Well, now boogie woogie chillin', boogie till the break of dawn.
And at our juke joint, we would have things called hoodoo parties at our juke joint. Some people frowned upon it. Some people didn't understand what it was all about. But, you know, down here in Louisiana, you know, in a juke joint on the bayou, I mean, come on. Hoodoo and voodoo and the blues all comes together. And it has nothing, like, again, I'm going to say it again, don't have anything to do with slavery. Didn't have anything to do with coming from Africa. Only 2% of black people, only about 2% of Africans that came over during the Atlantic slave trade made their way to America, and even fewer of them obviously were in Louisiana and in New Orleans. So if the blues really came from Africa, there would have been juke joints in Africa long ago. There would have been, maybe it would have come out of Brazil. But it didn't come out of those places. It came out of New Orleans specifically. And I would be here another hour talking to you guys about how it developed in New Orleans, you know, and go through all those details. And Storyville and this blue music, they created all these blue laws. The reason that the juke joint was way on the outskirts of town and some county outside, we have parishes here in Louisiana, but in Mississippi, you'd have to go way on the outskirts to be outside of the blue laws. There were blue laws, no drinking, no alcohol. There was prohibition. There was all these things that were illegal and that you couldn't do. But if you went outside of the jurisdiction, you know, then you could do the blues. And the blues being that you can do all the vice. You can do the gambling and the drinking, the illegal whiskey, the moonshine, you know, the whole everything that goes along with juke joint culture, you know. And sometimes people can take it too far. And you need some pushback. You know, you need to be reeled in a little bit. But this expression is something that is so deep and so spiritual that this film is the first to come close to kind of putting that on screen and making people feel it. And I was just so happy with it. And I was so happy with the other actor, what's his name, Delroy. When I saw the highlight and I knew that Delroy would be in the film, I knew the film was going to be okay. Now, I thought he might have even a smaller role than he actually ended up having in the film, Delroy Lindo. I'm butchering names, man. I'm bad with names. But I always, everything he's in, anytime he's on screen, he mesmerizes me. And he played Delta Slim. Now, I remember Memphis Slim. I used to play with Memphis Slim in Austin. Memphis Slim lived in about 93. Now, he wasn't necessarily playing Delta Slim. His character was probably based more on Rice Miller or Sonny Boy Williamson or somebody like one of the harmonica players. And these guys were heavy drinkers. I mean, a blues man don't go to the juke joint without his own stash, because you never know what you're gonna get. It might be poison. They might be cutting the moonshine with whatever. So you bring your own stash. So, and people think that Delroy is playing a drunkard, and he's not playing a drunkard. He just drinks. He's just a drinker. He's not and sometimes he might get drunk, and sometimes he get too drunk to play the piano or whatever. But that happens sometimes. That happens at frat houses. Sometimes some people, young girl, young guy, you know, they drink too much. It happens, you know. But I wouldn't say that he was an alcoholic, playing an alcoholic in a film. That's not what he was playing. He was playing a blues man. Now, the other thing about it, it's a fictional movie, so you can play with time and everything like that. But he was playing an older blues man. He was more from the 1960s, 70s, as opposed to a 1932 blues musician, because the blues wasn't invented until the late 1890s. So by the time it got to the Delta, by the time those twins, Smoke and his brother, brought the concept of the juke joint and the speakeasy and the moonshine and stuff down to the Delta, the blues was only 30 years old. So there wouldn't have been an older blues man. It didn't exist. So the oldest blues men were people like Jelly Roll Martin out of New Orleans, Bunk Johnson and people like this, would have been the older generation of blues musicians. But not a senior citizen type of blues musician wouldn't have existed at that particular time. So he was based on a more 1960s, 50s, version of a blues musician. So, I could go on and on. The movie was released on Easter weekend for a reason. I don't think that was by mistake. I think that the dichotomy and the friction that blues and the church, when I say the church, I'm talking about the Catholic Church in Rome. When I say the church, because there was just one church. And if you didn't follow what the church did a couple hundred years ago, then there was inquisitions and there was ways of dealing with you, or setting you on fire, or chopping you up, or doing whatever, putting you on there was all kind of medieval ways they could get at you if you didn't follow the church. And that's what makes the blues is because in this country we're supposed to have freedom of expression. And the blues is America's music. It didn't really have a unique music. All the music it had, up until the blues came along was, romantic music and Scottish shades, romantic classical music and things, from Vienna and places like this. Until the blues came along, till Jelly Roll Martin and people like that established the blues. And since about 1915, we've had the Baroque period of Western music. We've had the Romantic period. We've had all these different periods of music. But now we have been in the blue period of Western music ever since the blues arrived with people like Jelly Roll Martin and others. So they got the narrative right. And another thing, the woman in the movie who played the octoroon, kind of the tragic octoroon or the tragic quadroon, I thought that was beautifully done. Because she's not really welcome on either side of town, or either side of the tracks. And that's the tragedy but it's not her fault, She's not trying to, and people say she's passing. No, she's not passing. But she can get you in trouble in the South in the 1930s because people look at her and they might think that she is a white woman, but she wasn't white, and neither were the Irish, and neither were the Italians up in Chicago. A lot of people, Southern Europeans and Eastern Europeans, and the Irish and people, they were ostracized from WASP cultural dominance in America for a long time, and gradually made their way into that fraternity. So I didn't see the movie so much about race as it was about culture. One other thing I'll say before I close this thing, and I don't even know if I'm going to hit release on this. I might not even put this out. I'm just talking to myself here. But what else I want to say? I wanted to say something about, I'm not going to get too deep into the hoodoo and voodoo except that as it relates to music. And when you in the loa, the woman who played the loa, I heard people calling her witch doctor. She's not a witch doctor. She's a loa, or somebody who practices, hoodoo or voodoo. And I'm so happy that people could be proud and come out of the theater wanting to learn more and embrace that aspect of of African American culture, because here in New Orleans, even though people would practice Catholicism and be in the Catholic Church, they still brought the voodoo in there with them. And when you would see a woman in the church back in the day in the Holy Roller Church, and she'd get full of the Spirit, and the whole congregation kind of just stop and wait until the Spirit finished doing what it's like she's having a seizure or something. But she's not in pain, she's in joy. And other women might envy the fact that the Spirit chose her to enter her. And she has to just let it out, until the Spirit moves on. Well, that's what happens with the guitar and with the blues. When you see Jimi Hendrix do Voodoo Child or something, and he just get lost in the music, and with Machine Gun or one of his brilliant solos, or John Coltrane or whoever, they're kind of in the zone, and the Spirit has come into them, and that's kind of and the other musicians have to sit around just like the congregation in the Holy Roller Church. They have to sit around and wait until they don't even know how many bars he gonna play, how long the solo gonna do, but they got to keep drumming and keep playing and keep something happening, keep playing the tambourine or whatever, until the Spirit comes through him and passes through him, and that's what became known as a solo in blues. That became known as a solo. Louis Armstrong just get up, he started playing, and he'd be so high. Louis was smiling a lot because he smoked weed every day. But Louis was playing his trumpet, and everybody just gotta wait until Louis finishes. He got the Spirit. And so the whole band just kind of get behind that and roll with it. So, but someone else can talk to you more. There's a lot of other people that maybe now have a voice that didn't have a voice before, who practice hoodoo and voodoo, and people call it different names. But voodoo was in Louisiana before it came in from Haiti, because people came directly from Benin and other places into Louisiana with these things. They came with the gris-gris way back. And at the end of the movie, when he had the gris-gris around his neck to protect him, and that scene, with the child and his woman and their baby, and the two, he was bloodied, he was dying, and she was saying that son of a bitch ain't worth it, he ain't worth it, come to us, and that was beautifully done. So there were so many amazing moments in this film. And the fact that they followed that narrative that I created, the authentic narrative of my music and culture, is what they followed. And they followed it to a T. And I'm sure people in those meetings asked them to change this and maybe we should do it this way, or maybe, and they stuck to it. They had to. I guess people tell me he had final cut. Now I don't care if the movie made $1, $2.50, or if the movie was just made and delivered to my house and I watched it on my cell phone. I'm not a pocket watcher. This is not about money for me. It's about art, and it's about beautifying the world, and it's about enlightening people. And I don't want to get too philosophical, but I'm just saying this movie. The only important thing about box office and how many sales and everything, it means that maybe he'll get to make another film and be left alone to make that film, and it empowers him to do more good work. But the research that he did with the Chinese people in the Delta was very, very well done. With a grocery store on each side of the road, one serving the blacks over here, one serving the whites on the other side. Same family grocery store. They came into the Delta to do agricultural work, but they were able to rise up and to create, grocery stores and things like this. And so these guys did immaculate research and consulted with all kinds of folks. And so I'll just close out by saying, what's important to know is that what the folklorists and musicologists call the birthplace of the blues, northern Mississippi, it's a fairy tale, it never happened. In northern Mississippi, there were no black enslaved people. It never happened. There's no black history that goes back beyond plantation culture of the 20th century in northern Mississippi. Now, if you want to talk to me about Mound Bayou, which was the first frontier where they chopped trees and divided land, and Isaiah Montgomery, established Mound Bayou around the 1890s or whatever. That was the first town that black people moved into in what is called the Delta. When they lost their land to the boll weevil and lost their land for all kinds of other reasons, because they didn't have the right to vote, they gave up the franchise to do that, to be left alone. And of course, they're never going to be left alone. But anyway, when they lost their lands and didn't get the acres and things that they were supposed to get, they were recruited up to northern Mississippi to work those plantations, same as the Chinese were. They were recruited there to do agriculture and to do sharecropping in northern Mississippi. And so there is no black culture there. Vicksburg is not considered the Mississippi Delta of lore. Jackson, Mississippi is not considered the Mississippi Delta. And as a matter of fact, when you hear me say that I play Mississippi Delta blues, and you go to somebody and say, yeah, well, Chris said he play Mississippi blues, That's not what I'm saying. I said I play Mississippi Delta blues. And they say, yeah, from the state of Mississippi. And I said, no, that's not what I said. Because, see, I'm speaking Creole. When I talk about the blues, I speak Creole, and people get confused. If I say I play the Delta blues, I play the Mississippi Delta blues, that means I play the blues of Baton Rouge, the blues of New Orleans, the blues of South Louisiana, because New Orleans is the Mississippi Delta. There is no other Delta in North America. That's the Delta. It always have been the Delta for 1 million years, and it'll be the Delta for 1 million more. And there's no other Delta in North America. Now, there's a Delta, the Nile Delta over in Africa, but New Orleans is the Mississippi Delta. And you know how I know that? I know that because we were on rooftops during Katrina. And I think this is the 20th anniversary of Katrina. But my neighbors were on rooftops, standing on top of the chimney, and the Mississippi River was everything was covered up by the Mississippi River. That's how you know if you don't realize that you're in the Mississippi Delta at that point, there's nothing I can put in a book to help you. But northern Mississippi is not the Mississippi Delta. Northern Mississippi doesn't have any black enslaved people and culture or whatever that went on there during antebellum times. And, well, what was it? It was the Chickasaw and the Choctaw Nation. It was a nation of Native Americans. And there were no white people there. There were no, black people there. I'm talking about up until around 1832, when you saw the Native Americans show up, the Chickasaw, Choctaw people show up. And by the way, Charlie Patton, I believe, is part Cherokee. Is he Cherokee or Choctaw? But he's Native and black. If you saw a picture of him, you would know that Charlie Patton, the early Delta blues player. But that was the Native American land, and they were moved out of there by Andrew Jackson after he signed this thing in this Removal Act, defying the Supreme Court in 1830, and moved those people. Most of them didn't survive, but it was a genocidal move. But he moved these people to Oklahoma. But when you saw the Native Americans speak, he spoke English just as even better than the Irish folks, because these people had assimilated and believed that they could assimilate and adapt European mores, European ways, and shun their own traditions, cut their hair, become more Europeanized, become more WASP, and that they would be Christians and things, and then they would be accepted, and then everybody could live in harmony together. But that was a lie. It was never going to be that way. And so that's why they were dressed the way they were dressed. You know, they weren't dressed like you normally would see in their native garb or whatever. And that scene was done so well, and it's so much more that could be done with those Native Americans. I think a lot of people wanted to see more of the Native Americans, including me. But you can only say so much in a film, you know, no matter, I don't know what they cut out of the film or whatever. But the northern Mississippi was Native American country, and it wasn't slaves and all that in northern Mississippi. And black people didn't get up there until around the 20th century. And Robert Johnson was not born in the Delta. Robert Johnson was born closer to Biloxi than he was to northern Mississippi, and grew up in Memphis. And, you know, most of these musicians, their parents migrated up there to work the plantations in the Delta. So it's not like a continuous thing from enslavement. But the Congo Square scene is a film landmark. Now, you might not think it's Congo Square, but I see Congo Square because I wrote extensively about Congo Square and the guitar and the power of the guitar in Congo Square in my book. So it was amazing. Now, what I got to do is wrap this thing up because I got to start packing up equipment and get down to Snug Harbor for a concert. And Saturday, I'll be at the fairgrounds at the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, laying the voodoo on them. Laying the hoodoo and the voodoo on them with my guitar, y'all. So, anyway, yeah. Something like, been around the world, have done time. While I'm looking for a child, I can't seem to find. Going back home to New Orleans, the voodoo woman, she put a spell on me. Her first husband was a friend of mine, and her second husband treated her so kind. Now she want me to join the club, but they were both found face down in red mud, face down